comment,
and subscribe for more content.
Where's the notification bell?
It's to the right of you.
Oh.
What's up, guys? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Popcast, our fandom-related podcast on Pixar titled You've Got a Friend in Me, the Pixar Podcast. I am DK Wrestler.
And I am MD Shady.
And in today's podcast, obviously, if you are a fan of Pixar movies, that's great. If you're a fan of Funko Pops, that's great. But if you're a fan of both Pixar and Funko Pops at the same time, then that is fantastic. This is the podcast for you, in which in today's podcast, we will be discussing about all 26 feature films from Pixar and some of the Funko Pops that are involved with those movies, which, if you guys had seen in the title, this will be a two-part podcast because talking about all 26 feature films in one podcast would be a very long podcast. So the first 13 films will be on this podcast. The other 13 will be on the next, along with what Funko Pops we want to see next in the Pixar lineup, I guess, because we're talking about all of them. Originally, we were supposed to do a Coco podcast because it's the 5-year anniversary. Coco is a great movie. We'll get into that in part 2. But we felt that there wasn't a lot of Pops in the Coco lineup to do a full-on podcast. And then we realized there's so many other Pixar movies that have Funko Pops, but not a lot. So we thought, let's just do a Pixar podcast and get all of the Pixar movies pretty much over and done with so we don't have to revisit them realistically. But I guess to kick this off, I will mention Pixar, founded on February 3rd, 1986, although it was created as the graphics group through Lucasfilms in 1979. I do want to mention for this podcast some Funko Pops that will not be discussed about on this podcast before kicking off with the first 13 films. Alien Remix will not be a part of this podcast because obviously it is Alien from Toy Story dressed up as different Pixar characters. It has nothing to do with the movies. Any shorts and TV series Pixar Pops, so like the NYCC 2022 Kit and Doggy Pop and Buddy that was recently released, and then Pops from, like, let's say Monsters at Work, which we already went through last year on our Monsters Inc. podcast, and then Doug Days is another example of Pops we won't be discussing on this podcast. Also not being discussed about are random multi-packs and variants that don't fit just one movie. Example, first off, is the Pride Rainbow Wall-E. I mean, that wasn't featured in the movie. It was just a part of the Pride lineup for Disney. And then also there is a 4-pack that involves Wall-E, Remy, Carl, and Buzz for a very old 4-pack that they did back in the day, which it wouldn't fit one movie. That's like 4 different movies. But I guess before kicking off with the very first Pixar movie, MD, what are your thoughts on Pixar overall? Because for me, I find that I'm always more excited about a Pixar movie than, let's say, a Disney movie.
Yeah, I mean, from what it seems that regular Disney movies are kind of, they don't come out as much as Pixar movies from what it seems like, at least. And I mean, Pixar's been in my life forever, from Toy Story and Toy Story 2 to Monsters Inc. being a release that I was super excited about when it came out when I was a young child. So yeah, Pixar is amazing. I mean, they constantly put out amazing movies with this animation style that really paved the way for companies such as like DreamWorks. So yeah, I mean, just gorgeous movies. A lot of the times the stories are amazing. There are a couple of Pixar movies that maybe me and DK don't like as much as others, but for the most part, I mean, just beautiful, beautiful movies and a great company. I can't wait to see what else they do going forward.
All right, so I guess without further ado, we will kick off with the very first Pixar movie. That's the very first Toy Story movie, released on November 22nd, 1995, with a budget of $30 million, box office of $363 million, giving a profit of $333 million. And something new about these fandom-related podcasts is I thought I would introduce the Rotten Tomato rankings because I thought it'd be cool to compare. Do we agree with the critics' ranking of the tomato ranking or the audience score? So for Toy Story 1, tomato ranking, 100%. Audience score, 92%. And then the plot for this movie as provided by a user on IMDb. A little boy named Andy loves to be in his room, playing with his toys, especially his doll named Woody. But what do the toys do when Andy is not with them? They come to life. Woody believes that his life as a toy is good. However, he must worry about Andy's family moving, and what Woody does not know is about Andy's birthday party. Woody does not realize that Andy's mother gave him an action figure known as Buzz Lightyear, who does not believe he is a toy and quickly becomes Andy's new favorite toy. Woody is now consumed with jealousy, tries to get rid of Buzz, then both Woody and Buzz are now lost. They must find a way to get back to Andy before he moves on, but they will have to pass through a ruthless toy killer, Sid Phillips. It's pretty much a perfect movie. I mean, Pixar set the bar so high making this movie. I don't know if there will ever be a movie, in my opinion, that Pixar makes that could possibly top off the first Toy Story movie, in my opinion. It has one of the most amazing intros ever. Obviously, the theme song, You've Got a Friend in Me, is such an iconic theme song. So as terms to the tomato and audience score, which one do I agree with more? I would have to say the tomato ranking. I mean, I can't find a flaw with this movie every time I've watched it. So I got to agree with the 100% rating.
I mean, yeah, Toy Story is so awesome. If you guys know me and DK, we definitely really enjoy Toy Story, especially Toy Story 1. I am a huge fan of Toy Story 2, but there is this vibe with Toy Story 1. And it is such a groundbreaking movie, kind of like I mentioned earlier with this animation style. We really had never seen animation like this until Toy Story. And I don't know, it's just such a heartfelt movie, so funny. There's so many awesome moments in the movie. It will forever be one of my favorite movies. And like DK said, there really is not a flaw with this movie. A lot of people's favorite Pixar movie because, yeah, I agree with Rotten Tomatoes. Definitely a 100%.
And I guess in terms to Funko Pops, we won't go through an entire list because here on the channel, we did do a Toy Story fan related podcast 2 years ago, actually, to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the movie. So I'm only going to mention a couple of honorable mentions. The Woody with RC Pop Rides, great Funko Pop. I mean, we went into description about this on the podcast. The entire 20th anniversary lineup I really enjoyed because it was actually like the very first wave of Pops I ever bought with Woody, Buzz, Ham, and Rex. And then a Pop we did not discuss about on the Toy Story pod because it wasn't released then is the VHS covers. I felt like that definitely had to be mentioned on this podcast, at least, with Woody and Lenny the binoculars.
I think you summed it up pretty well with those ones. I mean, a lot of those are really great, especially that Woody with RC. Just such a great looking pop. So much so that I keep it out of the box because it just looks fantastic. But yeah, that VHS covers is also so cool. I can't wait to get my hands on that. DK does have it, but I don't have it yet. So that is a pop I'm looking out for.
All right, I guess we can move on to the next Pixar movie, which is A Bug's Life, released November 25th, 1998, with a budget of $120 million, box office of $363.3 million, giving it a profit of $243.3 million. Tomato ranking from the critics, 92%. Audience score, 73%. At an annual pace, a huge colony of ants is forced to collect every piece of food that grows on their island for a group of menacing grasshoppers. But that all changes when a misfit inventor ant named Flick accidentally knocks over the offering pile, thus forcing the grasshoppers' devious leader Hopper to force the ants to redo their gathering of food. Despite the fact that his friends don't believe him and are desperate to help save the colony, Flick volunteers to go out into the world and search for a group of warrior bugs. Instead, what he got was a talented group of circus performers, but when the grasshoppers return and take control of the island, Flick must prove himself a true hero before it's too late. I mean, A Bug's Life has a really special place in my heart because obviously as a person born in the mid-90s and Pixar just beginning, it was one of the OG Pixar movies. So it has that soft spot of being one of the first movies I probably ever watched. It is enjoyable. I will watch it from time to time, but I know when, let's say, doing a ranking list, unfortunately, I do feel it is like a mid-tier Pixar movie at this point because there are definitely better movies, but it's not entirely a bad movie at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you a lot there. It definitely has a soft spot in my heart as well. I collected a lot of Bugs Life toys and memorabilia as a kid, not so much as Toy Story, but yeah, it's definitely been there forever. And I have to agree with that kind of mid-tier movie. I mean, it's a great movie. There's not a whole lot wrong with it, but we've seen a ton now of movies from Pixar that are just unbelievable. So it doesn't really take away from this movie because it's great, it's funny. What did you say the Rotten Tomato score was?
I was just about to get into that because I forgot to mention which one I agree with. So the tomato ranking from the critics is 92%. The audience score is 73, which I don't think at this point this movie would be a 92% in my opinion, but I think a low 70s is a little harsh. So maybe I would go more audience score because it's not that high up as terms to a 92. I don't even think it's a high 80. So maybe like an early to mid 80s.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking like right around an 80%. I do feel like the audience score is a little bit harsh, and I'm kind of surprised by that actually, considering it is the second Pixar movie and very beloved.
As terms of the Funko Pops, there's only 3 pops, which this kind of explains what I was mentioning earlier on about so many Pixar movies not having that many pops in their lineup. So first off, we have ourselves Flick, which obviously a nerdy, intuitive, inventive, and courageous ant, although he is a well-meaning bug of the ant colony and wants to make a difference to the colony's way of life, he has a tendency of making things worse in the process. Princess Ada, the crown princess ant, the eldest daughter of the queen of the ant colony and heir to the throne of the ant island. She is very nervous throughout the film regarding her newfound responsibilities and often worries about what the rest of the colony thinks about her. And last but not least, Heimlich, an obese lime caterpillar with a German accent who works as a clown in P.T. Flea's circus troupe. He is very glutinous and always seems to be eating. Even during a performance, he offered to help finish one of the audience's candy corn. So, as terms to these pops, I mean, they're all pretty decent pops. I felt like Heimlich needed to be made because I felt like Heimlich was such like a fan favorite. I feel like when people think of A Bug's Life, they think of the moments that Heimlich did.
For the age of these pops, this is a great set. I mean, the detail that was put into these and just the way they look was very different from what we've seen with a lot of pops. And I really enjoy this set. I may or may not have bought a couple of the pops in this set yesterday. So stay tuned for the end of the month haul for November, where I will show off those pops. But yeah, this set's great. And I can't believe that there isn't more in the set by now, because there's a lot of really cool character designs with this movie and a lot of characters that definitely need to be in this set. 3 pops just isn't enough, in my opinion.
Okay, so I guess we will move over to the next film, which is Toy Story 2, released November 24th, 1999, with a budget of $120 million, box office of $511.3 million, giving it a profit of $391.3 million. Tomato ranking 100%, audience score 87%. While Andy is away at summer camp, Woody has been toy napped by Al McWiggin, a greedy collector and owner of Al's Toy Barn. In this all-out rescue mission, Buzz and the rest of the gang spring into action to rescue Woody from winding up as a museum piece. When Woody discovers he's actually a valuable collectible from the once popular television show Woody's Roundup and is reunited with his horse Bullseye, Jessie the yodeling cowgirl and faithful sidekick, and Stinky Pete the prospector, he doesn't want to leave. The gang must find a way to save Woody before he gets sold in Japan forever, and they'll never see him again. This is a great movie. When you look at movies with sequels, this may be as close as you're ever going to get as like you start thinking like, do I like the second one better than the first one? But for me, I always liked the first one just a little bit better. I felt like there was a little bit more memorable moments, although there were really cool moments, obviously, in the second movie. Toy Story was the first movie to do something that has been a tradition as terms to Pixar movies. And I wonder, MD, do you know what that tradition is?
I feel like I probably should. If it isn't something about Easter eggs, then it might just be slipping my mind, but I definitely should know what it is.
Yeah, basically, it is the Easter egg of teasing the next Pixar movie. And I actually thought it was Monsters Inc., which we'll get into next, that started it. But after watching some videos, it was actually Toy Story 2 that began this trend. And I have the examples of like how these trends have started for each of the movies. So for Toy Story 2, the tease for Monsters Inc. was when Woody is getting fixed up. In one of the cabinets, a drawer full of eyeballs, which you see in Monsters Inc. when one of the monsters puts fake eyeballs in his eyes before going into one of the doors, going to Monsters Inc. The tease for Finding Nemo was when Boo is picking up the clownfish toy, although there was a couple of clownfish references during that movie also, so there's more than just that. For Finding Nemo, teasing the Incredibles during the scene in the dentist's office, the kid in the waiting room has a comic book with Mr. Incredible on the back of it. Going for the Incredibles, how does it tease Cars? That is because there is a car model exactly like Doc Hudson during the final scene of the movie. So Toy Story 2 started off doing this cool trend that people have been trying to catch every single movie of like, could they find what's going on for the next film? So I really like that Toy Story does that. Some people think that it was a Bug's Life because at the credit scene, Woody does appear, and it so happens Toy Story is the next movie. But I kind of think it would be Toy Story because it happens during the movie and not during a credit scene to tease the next movie.
So yeah, Toy Story 2 is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's hard to put it above Toy Story 1 because Toy Story 1 is brilliant, but I feel like I really enjoyed Toy Story 2 for whatever reason. I feel like you get to see the backstory for Woody, which is really cool, something that's kind of unexpected. I don't know, I really just love the vibe of Toy Story 2. I love how you get the soundtrack for Woody's Roundup. I loved Woody as a kid. DK is more of a Buzz fan. I'm more of a Woody guy. So this movie was definitely for me. I feel like they introduced some cool characters where you finally get to see like Mrs. Potato Head because it's only hinted at the end of Toy Story 1. So I don't know. It's just such a great movie and definitely neck and neck with the original Toy Story. And like DK said, also being 100% on Rotten Tomatoes makes a lot of sense because it is one of the best sequels of all time.
And like usual, it seems like I'm forgetting to talk about what do I agree with as terms of the Rotten Tomato or the audience score. Rotten Tomatoes, because if I think it's like neck and neck, I would say maybe 99. That's how close. I wouldn't say 100, but obviously that would be closest to the tomato ranking of 100%. Now going to the Funko Pops. So obviously we discussed about the Funko Pops for this entire movie's lineup during the Toy Story podcast. So we'll only mention honorable mentions here. First off, I got to talk about obviously the Pizza Planet truck with Buzz Lightyear. I can't go and not talk about this on this podcast because that is my favorite Funko Pop of all time. Another one I got to mention is the Flocked Bullseye because I was a huge fan of when that pop came out. And then a pop, once again, that did not get mentioned on that Toy Story podcast, but had released since then is the Box Lunch exclusive Gamer Rex Pop Deluxe that basically kicks off the movie because Rex is playing the Buzz Lightyear video game and his arms are too short to play with the controller. And that's what the pop basically is.
Yeah, I feel like Toy Story 2 has a really good selection of pops. Like DK had said with that Rex, which is awesome. That's one of my favorite moments in Pixar history is that Rex scene. The Pizza Planet truck is really sweet as well. There's a lot of really great Toy Story pops in general, and Toy Story 2 being my favorite Toy Story movie, I feel like I really enjoy those pops a lot more than some of the others.
All right, moving on to the next film. It's Monsters, Inc., released November 2nd, 2001 on a budget of $115 million, box office of $577.4 million, giving it a profit of $464.4 million, tomato ranking 96%, audience score 90%. A city of monsters with no humans called Monstropolis centers around the city's power company, Monsters, Inc. The lovable, confident, tough, furry, blue behemoth-like giant named James P. Sullivan, better known as Sully, and his wisecracking best friend, short green Cyclops monster, Mike Wazowski, discover what happens when the real world interacts with theirs in the form of a 2-year-old baby girl dubbed Boo, who accidentally sneaks into the monster world with Sully one night and now is up to Sully and Mike to send Boo back to her door before anybody finds out, especially two evil villains such as Sully's main rival and scarer, chameleon-like Randall, a monster that Boo is very afraid of, who possesses the ability to change color of his skin, and Mike and Sully's boss, Mr. Waternoose, the chairman and chief executive officer of Monsters, Inc. So like I mentioned on the Monsters, Inc. podcast we actually did last year, which this will be another movie and series, I guess, where I won't mention the entire lineup because we basically did in that podcast. I'm going to mention again, if Toy Story was not made, I think Monsters, Inc. would be my favorite Pixar movie. The concept is so amazing, and they take this idea of kids being afraid of monsters that either are under your bed or in your closet, and they base it around like the lifestyle of the monsters and how like I mean, they don't really want to scare kids. It's just that's how they power up their city. That's how their hydro is based off of kids' scares. And I feel like with this movie has more memorable characters than a lot of the Pixar movie. And then as terms to the Rotten Tomato and audience score, the tomato ranking 96, audience score 90%. I gotta go with tomato ranking again. I mean, it's definitely a high 90s movie.
Monsters Inc. is a movie that also has a very special place in my heart. So much so that I remember like the day that I bought the movie and exactly where I bought it because it was just such a special moment to me because I loved the movie so much. Seeing it in theaters and then being able to get it on VHS with that blue cassette was so awesome. Such a cool clamshell box that they had for the movie as well. And I mean, the movie is awesome. Like DK said, the story is so captivating. It shows this whole other world that with your adolescent mind, you could believe is possibly true with this, there being like an alternate dimension where there's these monsters that are coming to scare children. Just such an amazing idea. The products that they put out for this movie too were unbelievable. Really cool movie. And the character designs are phenomenal. Probably the best in Pixar history because you have all these different monsters that look completely different from one another. What score I think is closer? I definitely got to agree with Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, this is a high 90s movie, if anything. And like DK said, if there wasn't Toy Story, I mean, Monsters Inc. has got to be the best.
As terms to the Funko Pops, I think my honorable mentions, I got to go with that entire 20th anniversary wave we got last year. Yeti, you got the new Mike Wazowski that we haven't gotten a new mold since the original wave, and just so many other cool versions of even Sully. And then obviously probably my favorite Monsters Inc. pop has to be the Roz that they made because it just looks so good for a Funko Pop.
Yeah, that set that DK just talked about was very unexpected, and I was very happy to see it because some of the molds on that are so cool compared to what we had seen previous for Monsters Inc., which wasn't a whole lot. The detail now with the pops is unbelievable. Like DK said with the Yeti, such a cool pop. And then I think I also have to mention the George Sanderson, though it is an older figure and doesn't really hold up well. I do think that's a special figure and is pretty much a grail at this point. So if you guys have that, that's a really cool pop to hold on to.
All right, going on to the next movie. Finding Nemo released May 30th, 2003, with a budget of $94 million and the box office of $904.3 million, with a profit of $810.3 million. Tomato ranking 99%, audience score 86%. A clownfish named Marlin lives in the Great Barrier Reef and loses his son Nemo after he ventures into the open sea. Despite his father's constant warnings about many of the ocean's dangers, Nemo is abducted by a boat and netted up and sent to a dentist's office in Sydney. While Marlin ventures off to try to retrieve Nemo, Marlin meets a fish named Dory, a blue tang suffering from short-term memory loss. The companions travels in a great distance, encountering various dangerous sea creatures such as sharks, anglerfish, and jellyfish in order to rescue Nemo from the dentist's office, which is situated by Sydney Harbor. While the two are searching the ocean far and wide, Nemo and the other sea animals in the dentist's fish tank plot a way to return to the sea to live their lives free again. Great storyline. I think the movie really targets the heartstrings of both kids and adults, especially if you are a parent, because this movie is definitely based off of a parent taking care of their child and like the struggles of what happens if you lose your child anywhere, I guess, not just obviously the ocean, but that's just a metaphor for this movie. There's lots of great moments in this movie, a lot of great like one-liners, and especially a lot of great characters, especially some we're going to discuss about with the Funko Pops involved. Rotten Tomato rankings, I don't think it is a 86 as terms of the audience score, but I also don't think it's a high 90s in my opinion, especially a 99. So, I mean, I think maybe I'll go more towards audience score this time because I would say maybe 90, 91.
Finding Nemo is definitely another great Pixar movie, and DK summed it up very well with the metaphor of the whole entire movie, which is great. and something that we haven't really seen from Pixar up until this movie. And like DK said, there is a lot of memorable one-liners with Crush, which is a character that Disney still uses at their parks to be a whole attraction, essentially. Fish are friends, not food thing. Just a lot of really cool moments in this movie. I really enjoy this movie. I don't think it's an 86. I also don't think it's a 99. I would probably put it at around a 92. So I guess I would have to go with Rotten Tomatoes just because I feel like the audience score is just a little bit too low.
We got 4 Funko Pops for the set, which I didn't think there was only 4. I thought there was way more. So Nemo, a young clownfish who lives with his father Marlin in a sea and no more. Before he hatched from his egg, his mother Coral and the other eggs containing his brothers and sisters were killed in an attack by a barracuda. Only Nemo's egg survived, which was slightly cracked as a result of the egg damage. Nemo's right fin is smaller than the left, thus Marlin worries about him and becomes overprotective of his only son. Dory, regal blue tangfish who suffers from short-term memory loss. Her home is in the Indo-Pacific Ocean. She is a crazy optimist with a big heart. She makes friends everywhere she goes, but often forgets sea creatures as soon as she meets them due to her memory loss. Crush, who is a 150-year-old green sea turtle who speaks in the manner of a surfer dude. He helps Marlin and Dory get to the Sydney harbor to rescue Nemo. And last but not least, we have Bruce, a great white shark who is the leader of the fish-friendly shark support group. Despite his appearance, Bruce is a kind and pleasant shark. He is also shown to be jolly, laid back, and a jokester. He is also honest and well-meaning. However, his personality is completely different when his instincts start to kick in and change him into a mindless, carnivorous shark temporarily. Obviously, we needed a Nemo. We needed a Dory. I mean, I don't think there was a point about doing a Marlin because it'd be literally the exact same mold as a Nemo, essentially, because they're both clownfish. Crush was a great choice on adding because I think he is such a memorable character, not even being a main character. He's one of the most memorable characters in that entire movie. So I really enjoy the fact they made a pop of him. Bruce looks pretty decent, but imagine what Bruce would look like if they were to redo him and make him in like a 6-inch form, especially with Finding Nemo, I believe, celebrating its 20th anniversary next year. We could see a new wave of Finding Nemo pops.
Yeah, I do think that these 4 pops are perfect choices. This is basically a perfect wave of pops. DK discussed it very well. You don't really need a Marlin because Nemo is already so close, though he does have the smaller fin and he is a smaller character. But I do also find it funny how Nemo is basically just this box with this Funko Pop, which makes a lot of sense for the Funko Pop style. Dory makes a lot of sense. Crush, being a fan favorite character, needed to be added. And I think that that pop looks really sweet. And then Bruce being the main antagonist, I mean, you kind of have to have him in there. And I don't think that pop is bad, but I definitely do think Funko could do a better job on it. And yeah, I really do hope that we do see a new wave of Finding Nemo pops come next year because there's definitely a ton of characters and a lot of really cool ideas that could be done Funko Pop wise for this movie.
All right, so the next film is The Incredibles, released November 5th, 2004, which I think was MD Shady's like 7th birthday, if my math is correct. I don't exactly know off the top of my head. With a budget of $92 million, or it's between 92 and actually $145 million, with a box office of $631.6 million, giving a profit of approximately between $486.6 to $539.6 million. Tomato ranking 97%, audience score 75. Bob Parr, aka Mr. Incredible, and his wife Helen, aka Elastigirl, are the world's greatest famous crime-fighting superheroes in Metroville, always saving lives and battling evil on a daily basis. But 15 years later, they have been forced to adopt civilian identities and retreat their suburbs where they have no choice but to retire as superheroes to live a normal life with their 3 children, Violet, Dash, and Jack Jack, who were born with secret superpowers. Itching to get back into action, Bob gets his chance when a mysterious communication summons him to a remote island for a top secret assignment. He soon discovers that it will take a super family effort to rescue the world from total destruction. Obviously, this was a great Pixar movie. I'm going to say that with a lot of the Pixar movies, especially in this part of the podcast. It was Pixar's first attempt actually at doing an action movie, because a lot of Pixar's movies are based off of like this one meaning, whether it's about parenting like Finding Nemo or friendship and jealousy like Toy Story 1. But it was a pretty great movie overall, so great that we ended up getting a sequel.
Yeah, like DK said, this was released right around my 7th birthday, and I remember going to watch it for my birthday, and I loved the movie as a small child. I remember coming home and just running around the house as fast as I could because I thought I was going to be Dash. It was just so cool, such a great movie. And yeah, the superhero thing was really well done by Pixar, which is kind of surprising when you look at Pixar's history of movies before this one. But a really great movie. And yeah, there was really no special meaning behind it like you've seen with the other movies. But at the same time, there kind of is. There are some different things in the movie with family and stuff like that.
And like usual, I keep forgetting whether I agree with the tomato or the audience score. I'd probably have to say tomato ranking just because 75 is so harsh for a movie like The Incredibles, especially the first one. The second one, maybe I kind of understand, but I got to go with the tomato ranking just because I think with this movie also, this is a movie that I want to put in my top 10 list, but I think it just falls short at like maybe like an 11 or a 12. So I think like that high 80s, maybe right at 90 is a perfect ranking for me.
I have to agree with that. 75 is just a bit too low. So yeah, Rotten Tomatoes gets it again. Around a mid 80s is probably about where I'd put it.
So there are 5 Funko Pops for this lineup. We have Mr. Incredible, obviously a person from a race of humans born with superpowers and is referred to as a super. He is one of the most famous superheroes of his era and was known for his skill at fighting crime. He's the husband of Elastigirl and the father of Violet, Dash, and Jack Jack. And not only was there a regular Mr. Incredible, but there was also a San Diego Comic-Con 2011 limited to 480 piece blue suit Mr. Incredible. This was his suit prior to being married to Elastigirl and being forced to retire as a superhero. Syndrome, the main antagonist of The Incredibles, originally wanted to be a sidekick to his then idol, Mr. Incredible, but when the superhero coldly rejected his offer, Syndrome became intensely resentful towards Mr. Incredible and superheroes in general. To take revenge on Mr. Incredible, he became a supervillain and devoted his life to murdering all superheroes. Elastigirl, a superhero with the powers of stretching out into different shapes and forms, she later becomes the wife of Mr. Incredible, the mother of Violet, Dash, and Jack Jack. And then the last pop we have here is Edna Mode, half Japanese, half German fashion designer, known for her short stature and habit of calling everyone darling. She is highly accomplished at her craft and is demanding of others as she is of herself. Surprised once again that this lineup only has 5 pops. I mean, we did get a crap ton of pops for the second movie, as we'll discuss about in part 2 of this podcast. But I mean, I enjoy the blue suit Mr. Incredible. I kind of hope that there's a new one that will be made in the near future. But the Syndrome was pretty decent. Think he could use a new mold. We got to see new molds, obviously, of Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl through the Incredibles 2 lineup, which we'll get into. And then Edna Mode, I don't know, do I want to see a new pop of her or just let this one be the only Edna Mode? I mean, they could make a new one, but I mean, this one is still pretty decent, especially with the way they did the eyes of this pop.
This is definitely a pretty surprising wave because it feels like there should have been a ton of pops for this with the rest of the family. But like DK said, we do see those in the future with the second movie. The Mr. Incredible pop, pretty cool. I think that Funko realized that they might have not have had the molding too great on this, and it was later fixed. The blue suit one is awesome. Such a cool rail. Anybody that has that, that's just sweet. I mean, 480 pieces is definitely a low count, especially with a movie like Incredibles, where a lot of people would definitely love to have this pop. The Syndrome is really cool, but I definitely do think we do need a new mold. One with a mouth, because I feel like his mouth is so much different than any other characters in this movie, and he has that like kind of weird, sinister grin to him. So I definitely do want to see a Syndrome in the future. Elastigirl, this is a pretty awesome pop for the time. I don't think they really had any flaws with this one. And then the Edna Mode looks awesome. And yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat with DK where I feel like this could possibly just be the only Edna pop we ever see, and that would keep awesome value on it.
Next movie we're going to discuss about is Cars, released June 9th, 2006 with a budget of $120 million. Box office at $462 million, giving it a profit of $342 million. Tomato ranking 74%, audience score 79%. After a humbling tie in the final race of the prestigious 2006 Piston Cup racing competition, the brash, self-centered rookie sensation Lightning McQueen is desperate to win the crucial tiebreaker race held at the Los Angeles International Speedway. However, instead of sunny California, Lightning McQueen ends up in the dilapidated desert town of Radiator Springs, a dusty city located on the legendary but abandoned Route 66. Now, as the cocky race car finds himself sentenced to community service, only a miracle could get McQueen back on the track. Can Lightning McQueen earn his way back to freedom? Will he learn a thing or two about friendship, family, and the things in life that are truly worth waiting for? This is an enjoyable movie. I remember seeing this for the first time, obviously, when it released in 2006, and I thought it was a pretty decent movie. I don't think it's up there in one of the best Pixar movies, but I don't think it's one of the worst. I think it is a mid-tier Pixar movie. It takes the typical storyline of like a celebrity and he ends up in a town that he doesn't want to be in, but then they make him change his mind in a very Pixar way. Lots of funny moments and quotes. One that I wrote down here on my notes is when Lightning McQueen discusses about Doc winning the Piston Cup. No one really believes him. And then Mater does a spit take with his oil and says he did what in his cup? As terms to the Rotten Tomato and audience scores, that's pretty close to where I'd rank it. I think I would go towards the audience score because I would think I would get it a even 80% in my opinion. It should have been a standalone film with no sequels. We'll get into that later on with some of the movies.
Yeah, Cars is a pretty neat film. Definitely not one of my favorite Pixar films, but it's not bad by any means. I remember watching it at the drive-in, which is a pretty awesome place to watch that movie. I mean, you're surrounded by cars at the drive-in, so I thought that was cool. There's a ton of different Cars characters, which I think is very interesting. It's Pixar doing what they do best in creating these very captivating, very cool, different characters. And seeing Cars that are animated like this and that can talk is something that we haven't seen besides maybe in something like Herbie. I would probably agree with, I don't know, maybe audience score. I don't feel like it holds up as well as some of the other Pixar movies we've talked about.
Going on to the Funko Pops, Lightning McQueen, I basically already mentioned like a little bit of what he is. And there's also the Dynaco version of Lightning McQueen, San Diego Comic-Con 2015, limited to 1,008 pieces. The blue would be the colorway of him if he was sponsored by Dynaco instead of Rusty's, instead of being red. Mater, a buck-toothed tow truck that bucks every trend and certainly does not toe the line. Although he perhaps is not the clearest vehicle in Radiator Springs, Mater has a wicked sense of humor and an even bigger sense of fun. If any car spends time with the tow truck, he or she will soon find him or herself hooked. Whether he is scaring tractors, driving backwards at an incredible speed, or teasing Lightning McQueen about being keen on Sally. And then there's also a blue Mater from San Diego Comic-Con 2015, limited to 1,500 pieces, and it was actually the original color of Mater before he was rusty. It was actually seen in a flashback during this movie. Doc Hudson, known as the Hudson Hornet, is one of the most famous race car drivers in history. He won 3 Piston Cups in a row and still holds the record for the most wins in a single season. However, it all changed for Doc when he was involved in a terrible car crash during the final lap of the 1954 Piston Cup Championship race, which saw him put out for a season. Upon his return, he was received with a complete absence of fanfare and told that he was a has-been who had been passed up for the next rookie in line. He kept a newspaper article of the career-ending crash as a reminder to never return to the career that nearly killed him. Ramon, which is a 1959 Chevrolet Impala that owns his own House of Body Art, Radiator Springs local custom paint shop, and he also makes sure to give himself a new coat of paint several times a week. With his chrome undercarriage and his up and down hydraulics, Ramon has been the coolest car in Radiator Springs for many years and is often seen cruising on the main road with his wife, Flo. And then there's also a green version of Ramon in Funko Pop form that was a Target exclusive. These are some pretty decent pops. Obviously, they are not your traditional Funko Pop box because they're all in sideways boxes, but it makes sense for these characters. They are cars. They are meant to be more wider, so they have to have those boxes. Obviously, I love the character designs in Funko Pop form, especially I want to give a shout out to the Dynaco Lightning McQueen, which has always been a really cool colorway of that blue color, and I really enjoyed. Part of me me kind of hoped that he had ended up joining Dynaco by the end of the movie, but I mean, it was still a nice ending of how the movie ended. Mater is cool with the two different versions. Doc Hudson, I felt like he needed to have a pop. And Ramon, I'm surprised that they only gave him two colorways, because I felt like with the amount of colors you do see in just that first movie alone, that he would have had so many different colorways in Funko Pop form, especially with Funko being notorious for making different colorways with the same mold.
For the pops for Cars 1, I feel like there are a lot of double up characters like we see with the two Lightning McQueens, two Maters, and the two Ramones, which isn't a bad thing because I definitely do think we needed these different variants, but I feel like there was just so much left out of this first wave. We do see more of the characters going forward, but this was just a little bit lackluster. I do like the sideways boxes. I have a complete hatred towards sideways boxes when you get a random one thrown in a wave of Funko Pops that have your traditional boxes, but because Cars is only sideways boxes, I think that works very, very well. And these are very displayable on a shelf by themselves, I feel like. Whereas with sideways boxes, with, like I said, another set is just a nightmare to try to display.
Next movie we have listed here is Ratatouille, released June 29th, 2007, with a budget of $150 million, box office of $623.7 million, giving it a profit of $473 million. Tomato ranking 96%, audience score 87%. A rat named Remy dreams of becoming a great French chef despite his family's wishes and the obvious problem of being a rat in a decidedly rodent-phobic profession. When fate places Remy in the sewers of Paris, he finds himself ideally situated beneath a restaurant made famous by his culinary hero, Auguste Gusteau. Despite the apparent dangers of being an unlikely and certainly unwanted visitor in the kitchen of a fine French restaurant, Remy's passion for cooking soon sets into motion a hilarious, exciting rat race that turns the culinary world of Paris upside down. I haven't watched this movie in so long, and when I rewatched this as terms to being prepared for this podcast, I mean, what a great story with a great meaning behind it. And I honestly find this to be such an underrated Pixar film. I feel like this is one of those Pixar movies that should be in everyone's top 10 list.
I have to agree with that. And I mean, on like a personal scale too, because I hadn't seen this movie till a couple of years ago and I couldn't believe that I hadn't seen it. One, because I'm a cook, so it really resonates with me. I don't know. I don't know how I ever passed this movie up until just a few years ago because, yeah, it is great. The story's awesome. It's a beautiful movie. The characters are really cool. You have this different selection of characters with the human characters as well, with the couple of rats that you do see in the movie. And I really enjoyed it. And like I said, it resonated with me a lot because I do this basically on the daily where I'm cooking. And I wish I had a little friend like Remy to help me out.
And with tomato and audience score, I might as well give it tomato ranking because I think it'd be mid to possibly low 90s.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that as well. I mean, it definitely does deserve to be in a lot of top 10s. So you would think with how great a lot of Pixar movies are in your top 10, most of those movies should probably be in the 90s or at least high 80s.
So as terms to the Funko Pops, we have basically 5 of them here, or 6 technically. So first off is Remy, which has a regular pop and a flocked chase, making it 6 now. A blue average-sized rat who dreams of being a chef. He's influenced by the famous chef Augusto Gusto, who often says anyone can cook. Emile, who is a brown overweight rat and is slightly larger than his younger brother Remy. He is friendly, understanding, and is the only one whom Remy tells about his cooking, TV watching, and reading talent. Alfredo Linguini, the son of Augusto Gusto. He knows nothing about cooking, which can be seen from many Chinese takeout cartons in his refrigerator and lack of cooking skills and knowledge. He's attracted to Colette, the only female cook in the kitchen. He can only cook by being controlled by Remy, who hides in his hat and often calls him Little Chef. And then we have ourselves a Diamond Collection version of the original Remy Pop, which is seen as a part of a pop and bag bundle exclusive to both the Funko Shop and Loungefly. And then recently released is a Pop Deluxe of Remy making Ratatouille that was exclusive to Box Lunch. And I mean, all these pops, I'll just round it off. These are some pretty decent pops. Obviously, regular one with the flock chase makes sense. A meal, that was a little bit of a surprise as turns to this set. Alfredo Linguini is also not a bad looking pop. Having a Diamond Collection version, do we really need that? And then obviously Remy making Ratatouille. How was this not made back when the pops were first made and not only recently?
Yeah, this is a pretty decent selection of pops. We have both of the rats, which is great. And I definitely enjoy the flocked Remy. That makes a lot of sense. Alfredo Linguini is a really cool looking pop and has really risen in price in the last couple of years, which I don't really understand because it was always kind of on clearance at our local EB Games at the time. And then I guess the last one I will talk about is the Remy with the Ratatouille. And that basically brings up the point that I feel like Ratatouille has the best title for a Pixar movie. I mean, the play on words is phenomenal. So great. And this pop is awesome as well. I can't wait to own this because for some reason I just haven't bought it yet.
Next movie we're going to talk about is WALL-E, released June 27th, 2008, with a budget of $180 million, box office of $521.3 million, giving it a profit of $341.3 million, tomato ranking 95%, audience score 90%. In the distant future, humans abandon Earth because there is too much trash on it. WALL-E, with the habit of picking up everything he finds interesting, lives alone on the planet with a pet cockroach. He has quite a collection of things, from lighters to a working iPod and even a small ring box without the ring in it. He even has the last living plant. When a spaceship comes to Earth and drops a sleek and dangerous probe Eve to look for a living plant, WALL-E falls in love with her. WALL-E gives her the plant, which makes Eve go into sleep mode. When a spaceship comes to take Eve back, WALL-E too goes with her. What follows is an adventure abroad in the spaceship, where the people move on hovering chairs and get liquid food when they suck up a straw. Due to laziness, they have become so fat and they are unable to move. Due to hastily given instructions given to it, Otto, the autopilot, tries to get rid of the plant, which compels WALL-E, Eve, and the pilot and some malfunctioning robots to find a way to retrieve the plant and save the Earth. Great movie. I will give the movie that, especially where your main character or characters only say a few words. It's got its moments, and I will obviously say that it is one of the best Pixar movies. It should be on everyone's top 10 list. But I do think that out of all of the Pixar movies, this may be the most overrated Pixar movie.
Yeah, that was very well put. The movie is great. And I do agree that it probably would make a lot of top 10 lists. And I mean, the whole point of the movie, with us being gluttonous and not really caring about our planet, is not really too far off of what could happen in the future, which is a crazy thing to think about, especially when you see every single person aboard this spaceship is like overweight / obese. What a beautiful movie, though. I mean, like DK said, your two like main characters don't really talk too much besides kind of just talking to each other with one or two words, which is quite unbelievable. This movie is really good, but I also do think it is overrated. There's so many people that go crazy about it when I feel like, I don't know, there's a lot of really good Pixar movies. This one definitely isn't the best of all of them.
As terms to tomato and audience score, I might go audience score just because I'm not feeling that mid 90s, but 90, all right, I can accept that.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Mid 90s is a little bit high for this movie, though it's really good. It's not that good.
All right, so the Funko Pops involved, there are a lot, but we won't go into description of obviously all of them. So Eve, the very original one, an advanced probe droid sent to Earth to do a scanning of the planet. WALL-E, a robot who is on Earth to clean it and befriends a cockroach, later meets and falls in love with Eve. We got the Box Lunch Earth Day exclusive WALL-E with plant, along with an Eve with plant, also a Box Lunch Earth Day exclusive released later on. WALL-E with the fire extinguisher, which this is when WALL-E uses the fire extinguisher to push him closer to Eve while in space. A flying Eve pop, along with a GameStop exclusive glow-in-the-dark version. Mo which also has a angry face Chase, which is a robot that is aboard the spaceship programmed to clean items deemed contaminated. We got a 10-inch Wally, Charging Wally, which was a specialty series exclusive, which is a part of the scene where Wally charges himself with a solar panel. Wally and Eve movie moments, which is when Wally is holding hands with Eve while she is in sleep mode. The Wally with hubcap, that was a Funko Shop exclusive. Wally with the garbage cube, which was a WonderCon 2022 exclusive shared with Amazon. And last but not least, we have Wally and Eve 2-pack, which is exclusive to Target. And this is where they are basically inside of the transport vehicle that Wally lives in. Pretty solid set of pops. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a ton of Wally pops of himself and not a lot of the other characters, especially there is some Eve, and then they introduced Mo in the new set. That best pop I would probably have to say is the Wally and Eve moments.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pops in this wave, which I didn't realize the abundance of Wally pops, but it makes sense because he does do a lot of cool things. I especially like the Wally with the fire extinguisher. I like how that looks. It has to be kind of on this smoke base, which is unfortunate considering he is flying and not really like bouncing off of anything. So maybe if they would have put like a clear stand on it with the smoke going more vertically, it would have been a little bit better, but I do really enjoy that pop. It's cool that we do get to see Mo or Mo, and the chase version's okay. I don't think it's necessary, but it is kind of a interesting chase to see. It's cool that we have seen a few different Eves. I like that, and none of them are really bad. And then, of course, you have that Moments pop, which is really awesome. You get to see both of the pops in one with kind of a look at what Wally has been living in on Earth.
Next film we're going to be talking about is Up, released May 29th, 2009. This is my 13th birthday, by the way. Budget of $175 million, box office of $735.1 million, making a profit of $560.1 million. Tomato ranking, 98%. Audience score 90%. Little Carl Fredricksen is a dreamer who idolizes the adventurer Charles Muntz. When he meets Ellie, who also worships Muntz, they become close friends. However, Charles Muntz falls into disgrace, accused of forging the skeleton of a monster of Paradise Falls. He travels in his blimp to South America to bring the monster back alive, but is never seen again. Eventually, Carl grows up and marries Ellie. They promise each other that they will travel together to Paradise Falls and build a house there. Many years later, Ellie dies, and lonely Carl refuses to move from their home despite of an offer from the owner of a construction company. When Carl accidentally hits a worker who damaged his mailbox, he's sentenced to move to a retirement home. However, he uses many balloons to float his house in order to travel to Paradise Falls. Adventure is sure's. Once again, it is one of the best Pixar films that has been made. It has one of, if not the most emotional 15 to 30 minutes intro to any Pixar film out there, telling the story with no words at all as terms to the marriage and friendship of Carl and Ellie. And I do find this once again to be a bit overrated because a lot of people do consider this as the best Pixar film, but I don't think it's as overrated in my opinion as Wall-E. As terms to the Rotten Tomatoes and audience score rankings, I would have to go once again audience score because lower 90s I would think about this movie.
This movie is really good. I do think it is overrated a little bit, but I mean, yeah, the story is unbelievable. And that intro to the movie, yeah, like not a lot of times are you crying at the beginning of a movie. That usually happens around the middle or the end of a movie. So they really did a good job with that, where they give you this whole backstory, like DK said, without any words, basically. And you fall in love with these two characters that are so completely in love with each other. And then they're basically torn apart. And then you get this version of Carl, which is struggling. You can really see that, but he still has this drive to do what he wanted to do for his wife, which is awesome. And then you see the introduction of other characters like Russell and Doug. I don't know if this movie is actually in the 90s for me. I might have to go with audience score for this one. I definitely do think it is overrated a little bit because people highly regard it as the best Pixar movie, which I don't think is accurate at all.
As terms to the Funko Pops, first off, we got Carl. We got a little bit of a description of him already, but then we got Russell, an 8-year-old wilderness explorer who is trying to get his assisting the elderly badge to become a senior wilderness explorer. Doug, a fun-loving golden retriever who speaks English via a special collar that translates his thoughts into speech invented by his former master, Charles Muntz. There's also a Flocked Hot Topic exclusive, along with a Doug with the Cone of Shame, which was a San Diego Comic-Con 2016 shared with Toy Tokyo exclusive. When Doug is not successful in his mission to capture Kevin, he is put in the Cone of Shame by the leader of the pack of dogs, Alpha. The Carl and Ellie 2-pack, the younger version, San Diego Comic-Con 2019 shared with Box Lunch exclusive. Kevin with the House Pop Town, which is a New York Comic-Con 2019 shared with Box Lunch exclusive. And obviously this is a 13-foot tall giant tropical bird of the species that Charles Muntz has been searching many years for. Carl and Ellie Moments, that's a Box Lunch exclusive, New York Comic-Con 2020, where they are painting the fence and the mailbox. Carl and Ellie with the balloon cart, which is also a Box Lunch exclusive. And then last but not least, we have Carl and Ellie 2-pack getting married. And I mean, overall, with this set, there are some pretty decent pops. Can there be different characters made? Possibly a Charles Muntz down the line, but I think they gave us some pretty solid pops. We got Kevin with the Up House, which is arguably maybe the best pop of this entire set. Maybe also the young Carl and Ellie 2-pack is the best.
Yeah, this definitely is a really decent lineup of pops. And like I said, with me feeling like the movie is overrated, a lot of people really enjoy these pops, especially pops like DK discussed with the Carl and Ellie 2-pack in their younger versions. So cool. The poses are great. There's so much detail in those pops. Probably the best pop out of this set. I really enjoy the Kevin with the Up House because I think that makes so much sense. You do find Kevin standing on the house itself in some parts throughout the movie. So I think that is a super necessary pop. We needed a Kevin pop and definitely needed to see the house because, I mean, if you look at this house, you can know like, oh, this is up. Look at the balloons. So cool. I wish they would have done more balloons and had them smaller rather than having just, let's say, what looks to be like 20 large balloons. So it is a little bit inaccurate, but that's okay because it's still a really gorgeous set. And then for the OG pops themselves, I think that those look really good for what they are. I mean, they're older pops. The Russell looks a little outdated now at this point, but I do think that the Carl is a great looking pop for a singular pop for this movie.
Next film is Toy Story 3, released June 18th, 2010, with a budget of $200 million, box office of $1.067 billion, making a profit of $867 million. Tomato ranking 98%, audience score 90%. As their owner, Andy, begins preparing for college, Woody, Buzz, and their friends feel like they need to move on as well. The toys are then mistakenly sent to a local daycare center with the intention of being played with again. But their enthusiasm is short-lived when they discover the true nature of their new home, which is run by the dictatorship of an evil bear named Lotso. Now it's up to Woody to rescue his friends and plan a daring escape in order to return home before Andy is gone forever. This is a great movie. I mean, with all the Toy Story movies, they are pretty much great movies. I don't think it's as great as the previous two. I mean, like, they're pretty much neck and neck, but it's still obviously a great movie, and especially for being a third movie, because a lot of times when you do these trilogies or franchises, like, the third movie is usually like the worst one out of the three. There's lots of emotions compared to the first two movies. Tomato ranking or audience score, I'll have to go with tomato ranking because if I said that it should be 100% for number one, 99% for number two, right on the dot, 98% for number three.
I can't remember if there was a time that I ever cried during a movie until I watched Toy Story 3. I saw it in theaters with one of our buddies, and it was actually the first ever movie he ever saw in a movie theater. And yeah, I wept like a baby. I was so emotional during this movie, and I really do enjoy it so much. A lot different than the first two movies. It definitely has a different vibe. Majority of the toys, well, basically all the toys are not in their normal home where you generally see them. They are at the daycare, which is a lot different of a set upsetting, but I think that that is a good thing for a third movie. Like DK said, how usually the third movie in a trilogy is not so great, but this one is pretty much right neck and neck with them. I do agree with that. And yeah, I would have to go with Rotten Tomatoes because I do feel like this is just so close to being a perfect movie, but not quite there.
And as terms of Funko Pops, there's theoretically only 4 Funko Pops in Toy Story 3. There's Chuckles, Mr. Pricklepants, and then the 2 versions of Lotso we had gotten, including the flocked D23 480 piece worth literally $2,000 Canadian. And they're all pretty decent pops, including the Lotsos that were made in 2011 and Chuckles. Crazy amount of detail in that Funko Pop.
Yeah, it's a shame that we've only seen technically 3 or 4, if you count the flocked version, 4 pops for Toy Story 3, because there's an introduction to a lot of different characters in this movie. And I feel like maybe one day we will see more. But for now, I do think that these 3 pops are great. Mr. Pricklepants probably being my favorite. I really enjoy how that pop looked. And I enjoyed the character a lot during the movie as well.
And here we go, guys. When we kicked off talking about, like, there was a couple of Pixar movies that, like, we didn't like. Oh, God, here's this one. So we got Cars 2, released June 24th, 2011, with a budget of $200 million, box office of $559.8 million, making a profit of $359.8 million. Tomato ranking, 39%. Audience score, 49%. Race car star Lightning McQueen is invited to the World Grand Prix, a race inviting all the best racers from around the world. But suddenly, things get turned upside down when Mater gets mistaken for an American spy, and a pair of bad guys called the Lemons are sabotaging the race with an evil camera. There are 2 questions in mind. Who will win the Grand Prix, and will the spy cars beat the Lemons? Oh, okay. So first thing I will kick off, there are no Funko Pops for this movie. And I mean, good on Funko, because the first thing I wrote all in caps lock in my notes, the worst Pixar movie ever. Oh my God. You go from having 15 years straight, I believe, if my math is correct, of these like banger films, Toy Story 1, 2, and 3, Up, Wall-E, Ratatouille. And you go downhill once you hit the 2010s, and with Cars 2, oh my God. Yeah, Cars 2, I felt had a hard time figuring out whether it wanted to be a racing movie or a spy movie featuring cars. I mean, I think a lot of what made the first Cars movie special was just stripped right away from us with this. I felt no emotion with this movie whatsoever. There's even the scene where Mater has a bomb strapped to his engine. And I mean, if that bomb exploded and that was the last time we ever seen Mater in a Pixar movie, I wouldn't have cared, because this movie, oh my. I felt also, and I wrote this in my notes, that if they were to do, let's say it was a spy movie about cars, this could have probably turned out exactly how I feel like people said about Solo, a Star Wars story. It might have thrived better as a Disney Plus series than it was a theatrical movie release.
Yeah, that was very well put. I haven't seen Cars 2 in forever because I just don't care to. It's not a good movie by any means. Yeah, it's got to be the worst Pixar movie. It's just so silly. The concept is silly. There are a couple things that I don't mind about the movie, but overall, it's just a hot heap of trash. I mean, just no good. Yeah, I definitely like DK's idea where it could have been a series rather than a movie, and maybe it would have been a little bit more highly regarded. So I definitely have to go with Rotten Tomatoes with 39%, and I don't even know if I'd give it that much.
I would have to say the same. Like, saying audience score would mean that's higher than the lowest rank possible. So it's the lowest rank overall between audience and tomato ranking. So now going to the last movie we are actually going to be talking about in this first part of the podcast, because that makes up 13 films, is Brave. June 22nd, 2012, with a budget of $185 million, with a box office of $540.4 million, with the profit of $355.4 million. Tomato ranking, 79%. Audience score 75%. Merida, a redheaded princess who lives in a castle located in Scotland. Her mother, Eleanor, is an elegant queen who is trying to teach Merida to be a true princess, but she doesn't want to be. Merida gets so fed up that she runs into a witch hut and she creates a spell pastry to give to Eleanor. After she eats it, she becomes a hideous beast, and Merida must save her mother from staying like this beast forever. All Merida wanted was to be free and have her mother stop being so controlling. Can she save her mother, or will Eleanor stay as this beast permanently? So this is Pixar's first attempt. Once again, they wanted to try something new, and this time it was basically a fairy tale princess movie. It was not bad. I mean, like, it's always good to try new things, but I don't want to see another fairy tale princess movie again from Pixar. I mean, leave the fairy tale princess movies to Disney themselves. That's what they're basically known for, and all like the major happy ending movies. I mean, not that there's a bad ending to this one, but it definitely is not one of the best Pixar movies. It certainly was better than Cars 2, though, I can mention that. And especially because it did capture like the Pixar type emotion, especially with the Merida Eleanor scene pretty much at the end of the movie.
So this is a movie that I actually hadn't seen until last week because I felt, this isn't me. I don't really generally enjoy movies like this. And then I started watching it and I go, okay, yeah, this is basic cliche stuff for like princess, or it's things that we've seen before. We see, oh, you made this mistake that you didn't mean to do and now you have to correct it. Also, the whole cliche of your mother wanting you to be this certain person and you don't want to be it. We've seen it time and time again. But as the movie progressed, I actually kind of really enjoyed this movie, which I don't know why, because it's not the best by any means, but it exceeded my expectations, which was a nice surprise for a movie like Brave.
As terms to tomato ranking and audience score, I think audience score, I can't even give it a high 70.
I don't know. This is a tough one because, like I said, I did enjoy it more than I thought I would, but it wasn't the best by any means as well. I'll probably go with audience as well.
And as terms to the Funko Pops for this movie, there was actually more than I had listed down on my notes here, which we have the regular Merida, a part of like one of the very first waves of Disney, along with a metallic version that was an SDCC exclusive. And then later on, there is a revamp that was made. And then last but not least, probably the newest pop as we are recording this podcast, realistically, for a Pixar movie, is the New York Comic Con 2022 shared with Entertainment Earth exclusive. These are all right. And I mean, do we need other characters? Not necessarily for this lineup. I mean, Merida might be the only character we ever get. Maybe I want to see like the small children possibly as pops in like a 2 or 3 pack. I can't remember how many kids there were. Overall, like if I don't see any more pops from Brave, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, this is interesting that we only see one character and multiple different forms. I mean, the first couple are terrible. Those pops look bad. I mean, they might be grails for some people because OG Disney is definitely things that people love to collect with Funko, but these pops just are very, very ugly compared to some of the newer Merida pops that we've seen, where Funko kind of realized like, okay, we don't have to have this straight up and down versions of pops where nothing's going on. You have a little bit of the wind that you get to see going through the hair as well as the dress. And yeah, I would like to see some more Brave pops because I do think that some of the character designs are pretty cool with a few different characters, but we'll probably talk about that in the second part of this podcast.
Anyways, guys, that is going to be the end of this part of the Pixar podcast. If you enjoyed what you've been listening so far here on Funko Popcast, make sure you smash that like button. Comment in the comment section below and let us know some of your favorite pops that we have discussed about so far in this part. Press that subscribe button for more content like this podcast and any other videos we do on this channel in the future. And press the little bell beside to be notified of when future content such as podcasts like this get released. And if you guys haven't yet, follow us on all of our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at A Funko Podcast. It'll be listed in the description below. But anyways, guys, that's going to be the end of this podcast. Definitely stay tuned for part 2 as we discuss about the last 13 feature films for Pixar and what pops we want to see next in the Pixar lineup. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
That wasn't flying, it was falling with style. Peace in, peace out.